Blood Money, episode 76, with former Feds Brad Geyer and CC Blakeman. How the Feds became politicized and came to work against our interests. First of all, cool name, like former Feds. Tell me all about that. What's the meaning behind all that?
Well, it started, the early iterations of our nonprofit involved extensively the use of retired former federal career civil servants. We still have those in our organization, but before it was a disqualifier for anybody else. And when we retooled in the summer of 2022, we dropped that as a requirement because we had to scale.
You have to scale. So you're a former federal agent, right?
I was on detail for the FBI as a overseas procurement fraud, grant fraud, science fraud, corruption prosecutor. But for most of my time, I was a white collar prosecutor with the antitrust division, the criminal division, and then I was on special details in different U.S. attorneys' offices.
So, I mean, right now, in modern day, a lot of people think about the Feds in a negative light because of some of the things that have happened. So there are the good guys out there. There are the guys that care about this country, that are patriotic, that care about where this country is going.
I believe that to be true. I also have to acknowledge that in 2009, there was a ramped up politicization of the Department of Justice. I was getting feedback from agents I then knew inside the FBI. There was also a lot of things that were done in the offices of Inspector General. The result is that they're heavily populated now, represented by folks from one side of the spectrum. And I think that has been a disaster. In the old days, career civil servants, we just had political blinders on. Politics it was pretty much irrelevant to us.
Yeah, and you use that word civil servants. You use that word twice, which is, I don't think, something that's used enough, that we are civil servants when we're working for this country.
Yes, and it was a higher, I mean, I viewed it as a higher calling. That's why I wanted to secure all the intellectual property around the concept of former Feds in 1996, no, 2006. When we would have charging conferences, when we were working with FBI agents or agents from other agencies, we literally tried all the time to promote the interests of justice. And just as one example, in terms of turning over information to the defense that aids the defense or is exculpatory, tends to prove the innocence of the defendant, we would have meetings for days to make sure that we scrubbed the entire record and provided it to the defense in a way where they could interpret it, they could take it in, they could evaluate it. And even in cases where you had a counsel who was in over his head, which would occasionally happen in, say, some of the general crimes cases that we dealt with in the federal system, we would actually work with the defense counsel to make sure that they understood the defenses that were applicable to that defendant. I did that routinely. It was part of my job as being officer of the court, and also the oath that I took that, yes, we're prosecutors, but we were also protecting the justice system. We lived and we breathed that. I don't know what the heck's happened.
So take me, for the viewer that doesn't understand what's happened within the Feds. Now, take us through the journey between 2009 to where we are today, of what are the steps that had to take place in order for our federal agencies to be so politicized, some would say to be anti-American, to be against the interests of the people of this country, to cause friction. There's a lot of theories out there. What happened that got us to that point?
So when 2009 happened, there was a sort of a wind that was swept the country. We were coming off the 2008 financial crisis. We have to go back, by the way, and look at that and see why that actually happened. It was total failure of the financial system. And you had TARP bailout. I forget the numbers, but hundreds of billions. And even prior to the election in November, in October, they were bandying about, both parties, a $1.2 trillion aid package. And I know this because subsequent to that, I had a key time relator inside a public utility,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw all these documents from October where everybody was referring to all this free green money, that literally that fire hose is just blasting the entire country with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that as a way to basically redesign a lot of the traditional money flow routes as it had worked up until then. So you had a bailout of the car industry, and they put their thumb on the scale in terms of seeing that through. You had a bailout of media, where basically there was a reverse buyout of the media by the government. Yet, obviously, the financial industry was largely nationalized. And this set up the Affordable Care Act in roughly 2010, which was really the foundational pillar for
Mm-hmm.
getting us away from this doctor-patient privilege driver of public health care, in addition to informed consent being the law of the land. And as you know, for centuries, we were marching forward. We had, all this weapons development, bioweapons of World War I, gases, all kinds of terrible things. Then all kinds of terrible experimentation in the death camps in Poland and the Soviet Union. And the Allies in 46, 47 came up with this ingenious strategy. We're going to build everything around informed consent when it comes to anything medical.
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically the high point. The U.S. government imposed on everybody else. They brought us kicking and screaming, but it was reiterated and reissued in various forms, mostly non-binding forms, most notably the Helsinki Protocols in 2000, I'm not sure, 2010 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the government just basically relinquished all of that. So from 2009, there was kind of an air in the Department of Justice that you can't get in the way of this. It's un-American to get in the way of this wave that's coming. This is going to be a new bright government, a new optimistic government.
Yeah.
And they started hiring in career. This is always done to a much lesser degrees. You may recall in maybe 2005, 2006, there was somebody who would set up shop in like a janitor's closet in the White House from Bob Jones University, who was trying to pack like one agency, right? And they got busted in their congressional hearings. They got fired, and it was wound up. Well, this was done writ large across all agencies. Wow. And so, for instance, I mean, I actually know how it was done in the Department of Justice. It was almost like everybody abandoned this longtime credo that for the career civil servants, we all benefit from putting an umbrella over them. They're this like immovable object, this foundational structure that can't be moved. And regardless of the political whims of whatever party that comes in and wants to run after this kind of crime or that kind of crime, you're going to have to move these intransigent, fuddy-duddy civil servants. And, I used to see, as an example, I remember there's this one guy, I think it was in Tennessee. Nobody wanted to do these pornography cases anymore in the federal system. Mm-hmm. And it was just a guy, like this career civil servant guy, sitting there in an office somewhere, cranking out these cases, and nobody could do anything about them. And that was the beauty of the system. 2009, we went through these different iterations every single year. It got everybody more and more in lockstep.
Wow.
In conjunction with the inspectors general and the FBI, went to a compliance model, which basically, instead of putting all your resources to investigating crimes, we're going to make everybody a trainer, and we're going to train out of everybody this inclination to engage in fraud and corruption. Totally preposterous. And everybody to subscribe to that new wave that came through, everybody had to worship the altar, the great altar of the power of compliance programs. And everybody, measured it and did, benchmark studies on all this nonsense. And the bottom line is we're now in a totally agency captured system that's largely driven by fraud and corruption. I'm sorry, I took too much time, but that's
No worries, no worries. I want to come back to this topic because I think talking about the way this all happened, we should dive into it a little bit more. But before we do that, Carolyn, do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background and how you're involved with former feds and in what capacity you operate within the organization?
Sure. Well, I met Brad, like you said, when the early treatment movement started. I was a political blogger, I still am, and I saw government corruption for years, and I was blogging about that. So when the pandemic was announced, I knew something was up, and I obsessively researched protocols across the world, and found which ones worked, which ones didn't in different countries. So I knew early 2020 that there were working treatments available, and that we were being censored from that information and unable to get those treatments. So I was in Mexico actually, and I bought up all the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine I could find. And like I said, in November 2020, my husband and I got COVID, and we took the ivermectin and the hydroxy immediately. Then I went and got tested. I got my negative test back from before my positive, but we had symptoms for 3 hours. And that was the moment I knew they're killing people.
Wow.
Brad and I, he had saw one of my blogs and contacted me about getting on a Zoom call with him. He was suing Facebook for censorship of early treatment at the time. And I just written a blog about the censorship. And so he asked me to be on the Zoom call. And then we met up again in a Facebook group called the People's Medicine that kept getting taken down and taken down. Eventually talked to me and asked me to, work with him on the former Feds Foundation. And I kind of just threw myself in and took over. I was first just writing content, and then now I'm media director and legal liaison and task force director.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
So, what was it that was it just the research that informed you that there's something really seriously going wrong here? And this is, I don't want to use the word genocide, but it seems like if you're injecting 6 billion people with this, and a lot of them might die of myocarditis or other ailments, it does seem like that's what it is.
Well, yeah, I lost a daughter in 1995. So when the pandemic was announced, I was very, very determined to find a way to keep my family and myself alive. I could not go through that grief again. And so that's why I researched it immediately. I'm like, there's got to be something that's going to save us. And I found it very quickly. Look at India, Uttar Pradesh. There was, countries and cities around the world that were completely obliterating COVID. And here we are, the most advanced country in the world, and we had the highest by far number of deaths. So I knew, something was up because of that. Just by losing my daughter is why I researched so heavily into this. But yeah, what I knew that the early treatments were being censored when they started calling ivermectin horse paste, when it's a 40-year-old drug that won the Nobel Peace Prize, and used on children for scabies and lice. It was just so obvious. They didn't even try to hide it very well that they were trying to, put out this disinformation campaign on drugs that are been used with humans for 40 years, and safe ones at that. So, that's how I really knew that they were up to no good. And then when the jabs, of course, came out, all the injuries and deaths, and that was completely being censored. And the push, when have we ever pushed a vaccine on people where we're bribing them with money, or children, bribing them with donuts? Yeah. And it just was too fishy for me.
Yeah.
I think Americans have lost their ability to think critically because they promoted this sense of fear in everybody. The media with the death ticker going and the refrigerated trucks, everyone was scared to death. So it just, brainwashed them to run out and get this experimental vaccine that's not even a vaccine. But we lost our ability to think, well, this doesn't really make sense. But I didn't lose mine, thankfully.
Yeah. Sorry about my image, by the way. I don't know. Today we're having some computer issues, but I know the viewer could hear my voice. So it's what I find very fascinating is that a lot of the people in this freedom fight that are actually fighting for the right thing are also people that have had trauma in their past, people that have experienced some of the evils in this life. Is my audio coming through fine, by the way?
It
Okay,
is.
my picture's all frozen, but at least you guys could hear my
Oh, there you are.
yeah. So I mean, I just find that fascinating that people that have actually had difficult things. As we were talking before the call, my ancestors are Armenian genocide survivors, and that informed me about what was happening. And I kind of, the timeline of that is the Armenian genocide happened in 1915. The planning started in 1911. I kind of feel like we're at 1913 right now, at least in my perspective, from my family history. What would you say to that as far as like some of the folks that are involved in this freedom movement and why they are fighting so hard?
So for me, I think the big differentiator was I was in 9/11. We had an attorney conference in New York, and I was in the World Trade Center Marriott, and I was like a couple blocks away from the first building when it fell, and I had a really bad case of PTSD that I'm mostly over, but you never really get over it. But that made it difficult for me to accept the usual inducements that most people would take. I think that I'm very, it's not available to me. It isn't that I'm not, interested in wealth and things like that, but it has to meet certain requirements. And I think a lot of that came from my moral upbringing by key figures in my life. But I think it was just crystallized in 9/11, where I kind of have a deal or something. I can't really explain it, but I know what you mean. We also noticed that a lot of our victims, the process they go through where they start out thinking my loved one was killed in a hospital, the hospital did everything it could, it's a tragedy, to, oh my God, the treatments killed my loved one. That causes deprogramming. You're probably familiar with Yuri Bezmenov.
I'm not actually, no.
Oh yeah, I'll send you a link. In the late 1980s, this is like Russian anti-communist, and I was a big anti-communist. He broke it out into the 4 stages of programming and societal decline into the communist abyss. And at the time, I think he probably would have said we're in the late 2nd stage or early 3rd stage. Now, I think
What year was that? What year was that?
The videos that you can most easily access are from 1984.
Wow. Okay.
But he talks about how the takeaway I'll send you a link. The takeaway is that forget about deprogramming people when you get to the 3rd and 4th stage. Like, it's impossible. Don't waste any time. And ever since that time, I've been trying to come up with a deprogramming strategy, working in my own private laboratory of life, and this may have the potential to do that, because when you see these stories, and we now have over 700 of them, these eyewitness accounts of how people were killed by hospitals, it really does ring your bell. And I'm hoping that somewhere in here, some group of experts can come in and help us with some sort of deprogramming, deconditioning program built around this, because that's really what we have to do to save the nation, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, for those that read history, I mean, there was a whole deprogramming that happened for a decade after World War II, right? Where there's denazification happening. Is that the sort of thing we're talking about? Where, I mean, hopefully there is no war, hopefully there is no catastrophe, but are we talking about that sort of thing where there has to be a mass national deprogramming in order for us to get back on the right track?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, everything that I say is a working model, right? We don't have a monopoly on the truth. We're trying to struggle to find meaning in what we're seeing, and when we find it very confusing. But I mean, one way to look at it is we've been in some kind of an information war now for a period of years. We don't know when it really began. You can pick different times. 2008. You can pick the beginning of the pandemic. You can, there's different times you could pick. But the end result is that the civic compact that we all had as a nation for well over 200 years, closing in on 300 years, has somehow been diminished. Our First Amendment is largely gone. Our Fourth Amendment's gone. I mean, the U.S. government is collecting on us all the time. These ideas that, I don't agree with what you say, but I'll protect your right to say it. That somehow got heaved over the side of the ship more than 5 years ago. These issues of the primacy of doctor-patient relationship confidentiality, that's out the window.
Wow.
And we could just pick all these things that were like the core foundational structure for a constitutional republic where everybody as a citizen had their bases covered against encroaching government, which when you look at civilizations, it's always the problem. And that was systematically dismantled.
Yeah. I'm going to turn my camera off, by the way, because you guys could hear my voice. My camera's doing all sorts of weird things. Okay, let's talk about getting back to how we got to where we are right now. Now, a lot of people blame the Obama administration for these policies that changed the nature of our federal government. I mean, where do you hang the blame as far as what got us to where we are currently?
Well, I think it would be a mistake to blame everything on Obama or blame it. I mean, because from my vantage point, we're all complicit. Like this all happened on our watch. We were a generation we were handed this bountiful harvest that we were supposed to treat as caretakers and stewards, and we completely failed. They threw Netflix at us and 24/7 porn, and beautiful restaurants and all the bountiful harvest that globalization brings, and we forgot all the important stuff. So Obama, I think, was had a massive influence, but again, he and I believe leadership of the United States government are representing other interests, and both parties are complicit. It's very hard to get any Republican support, for instance. Our Wolfpack widows, it's very hard to get anybody to return our calls at the state or federal level.
What do you say, Wolfpack widows?
That's what he calls our widows, because they're, the Wolfpacks in back, I think it was World War II, were in the little ships sinking the big ships, and it's just kind of an image of strength, and they're coming after you because these widows are not giving up. And they thought they were just going to roll up and crawl in bed and pull the covers over, but no, they are fighting, and they are going to fight this to the end. And
Wow.
to answer your question too, I think it's been going on a long time. The destruction of our country, and parents not teaching their children what it means to be an American. I think that's one of the biggest problems. To have pride in this country, to fight for this country, and in 1997. At the summit in Rio de Janeiro, when the UN proposed the document Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st Century, and 178 world leaders signed it. And I've read that document. It's the most un-American thing I've ever read. It's terrifying. Moving people into city centers, going totally green, freedoms. It's depopulation in a nutshell is what it is. And, every president up to Trump signed that document, re-signed it every year, Republican and Democrat. So I think that's one of the reasons where we're at.
Wow. So let's dive into a little bit about how you guys function at former feds. You guys are doing a lot of great work. You guys are involved in lawsuits. You guys are involved with some great doctors like Dr. Peter McCullough. Tell us about some of the services and agendas of former feds.
I mean, good. Okay, so we have our COVID-19 Humanity Betrayal Memory Project, which is a large searchable database where we record stories of the hospital protocol victims and the vaccine injured or vaccine deaths. And this database is searchable by state or by date or by medication. We have about 700 stories in there right now. We do a live recorded interview, a written account of this what happened in the hospital, and all the details of the case. And so we put that up on our website. Then when we come across attorneys that want to look at cases, we can just send them the complete case file, and they don't have to do the initial intake or consultation. It also preserves the historical record, so we can remember what happened to these people and make sure it never happens again. And then we have the Amnesty and Leniency Program, which I'll let Brad talk about more, in the Humanity Restoration Panel. But we also just started a project called We the People 50, Recall the Shots, where we're going to go through the state attorney general's office to get the vaccines, because they're not vaccines, they're gene therapies, recalled under the consumer product protection statutes because they're contaminated. We have the science, the facts that they're contaminated, they're adulterated, they're misbranded, they're mislabeled, but they're clearly contaminated, just like you recall contaminated baby food or dog food. So that's our project that we just started with Dr. Jancy Lindsay, the toxicologist and molecular biologist. So we have a lot of different things going. We offer support groups to the victims 6 nights a week, all kinds of, men's only, women's only, soul care, who lost children, volunteer meeting. We have a big Monday meeting where we have anywhere from 100 to 140 people on with experts, doctors and lawyers. So we have a very active task force of volunteers across the country. It was 4 of us. Now there's like 165, I think. So, we're growing every day. We have a pretty good social media presence, and we're just trying to educate the public on what's going on. Get these people justice.
Everything that you're saying sounds like services, or most of what you're saying sounds like services that the government should provide, a good government should provide. But you guys are doing it all through a nonprofit.
Yeah, so that's an important point. So one of the things there was no such thing as successful legal actions fighting this. Like we don't even know what happened to the large, medium-sized law firms. They just disappeared from the field. Similarly, they disappeared from the J6 field. You could get a large law firm representing, a top 20 law firm to be a very popular thing to do, to put an associate to represent somebody in Guantanamo. But good luck finding any big law firm support to represent a decorated veteran who's in the DC gulag, right? So we're in very uncharted territory, and we wanted to affect the demand side and the supply side. I'm a former antitrust guy, so I think in terms of markets, and we affected the supply side by identifying victims, letting them record their story, similar to the plan that was adopted by President Eisenhower in 1944 and 45. Send everybody out and do interviews, and we scale that so that builds up informed people who also become plaintiffs. And then we are affecting the demand side by finding law firms that are willing to take on these cases. And then we have a very sophisticated way to reduce their costs. Matthew Cresto, who lost his wife, they have small children, built a software program that's bolted into our fully functional platform that basically digests thousands of pages of billing documents and puts it into reports. That allows more law firms to assess cases faster. Might take a week or two to figure out if there's anything there. Now it probably can be looked at in an afternoon. And that, of course, also lessens their load by up to 75% in terms of the pretrial costs to get these cases filed. We also have access to experts who work at significantly discounted rates. So we're basically creating systems on the humanity restoration, leniency and amnesty program. We took a page from the antitrust division that had a corporate leniency program that ultimately resulted in 95+% of the recovered criminal fines that came into the entire Department of Justice. We took those technologies that was eventually was adopted by the FCPA unit, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act unit in the criminal division, also the healthcare fraud units. And we developed our own leniency amnesty program that will be administered by Dr. Peter McCullough and top non-corrupted physicians and researchers who will then take those applications and write-ups in terms of in memo form as to what a whistleblower, whether a nurse, a physician, or researcher did. A lot of these people want to get this off their chests. We make a presentation to the Humanity Restoration Board, and then they decide how much they want to get involved. Will they go and advocate for the person in front of a board? later on, when we're able to restore our institutions, including our enforcement agencies, we will be, I would venture to think that they will be making recommendations to those enforcement agencies that these physicians, researchers, and nurses should receive leniency up to and including full amnesty. You're correct to note that we are picking up where the enforcement agencies have abandoned us. Everybody has abandoned us. Our elected politicians abandon our members. Enforcement agencies have abandoned our members. And that's why on April 19th, our victims, survivors, will be referring their cases to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and all the resident agencies. And we're going to measure what the FBI's response is.
Wow. So is it hard finding law firms that'll back these kind of cases?
Cece?
It is. When we first started, I sit there and call law firms all day long, and just if you said the word COVID, you get hung up on.
Mhm.
I've built up quite a database lately of attorneys that are either taking cases or considering taking cases. One of our attorneys in California, Matthew Tyson, he's amazing. We've sent him about 45 cases. He's taken all of them. And yesterday we had a ruling that our first case we referred out to him got past the PrEP Act immunity. So we're very, very excited about that. Then we've got another set of attorneys, Dan Watkins and Michael Hamilton, who are taking cases in California, also Arizona, Texas, and Michigan. They want to take cases all over the country, but they need attorneys in each state that they're not licensed in to do the filing. I had my second attorney change maker meeting, is what I call it, the change makers, the second one today, and we had about 25 attorneys on that are all interested in coming up with theories and brainstorming together on how to pick up these cases. But I've got about 650 that need to be picked up, so I'm always looking for attorneys.
Wow. Speaking to a lot of doctors that have been part of the medical freedom, including Dr. Peter McCullough, people like Dr. Levy, people like, Scott Miller, they claim, and I think these are accurate numbers, that out of 1 million doctors, really only 500 or so stood up to the tyranny. And something similar with the lawyers. Now, those are atrociously low numbers. I mean, what is going on that so few are actually standing up to their duty to protect our rights in our country?
They don't think they can get through, and we showed them yesterday that we could through the immunities, and it's just too risky for them, I guess. Like you were saying earlier, that tragedy, probably someone had trauma in their life. Dan Watkins was in Las Vegas at the Las Vegas shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So him and Michael Hamilton work together. They're men of God, and they feel morally compelled to take these cases and protect humanity and get justice for these victims that were murdered in hospitals. I mean, all of our survivors they're eyewitnesses to a crime.
Yeah.
They literally watched their loved ones be tortured and killed. So, I think you just got to find the right kind of people and the right person, and that's who you build your foundation with and surround yourself with, that they're going to step up and help save this country and humanity in a nutshell. I mean, we're trying to stop a genocide here. It's kind of a big task. So we need as many to come forward as possible.
I mean, do you feel, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it strikes me that it may be that, I think that's probably an accurate estimate. And it may be that that's actually a higher number or percentage than you would have found in World War II Germany, or in what happened with the Armenians during World War I. I don't know, but what's the commonality is systems somewhere somehow got corrupted, and I'm not sure where the threat is coming from. I'm not even sure the nature of the threat, but it's kind of like a sign of our times. You can see Elon Musk just bought out Twitter, which was basically a government platform that they were using to impose extreme forms of censorship and suppression on American citizens. Totally inappropriate, illegal, probably criminal if there was enforcement agency that would take it. He's been cleaning out that viper nest now for some months, and there's still problems in his code. He can't, he can't find it. That's why there's been discussions about having him make the code public, right? So the way I look at it is that over the course of a couple decades, we just got bad stuff in our whether it's administrative, all the administrative stuff, the millions and millions and millions of records in state and federal governments, whether it's bugs in computer programs. I'm not sure who's doing it, but it's corrupted everything. And it's really easy to get on this moving walkway and just go through a series of little corruptive acts. And by the time you get to the, into that movement of the walkway, you're doing abominable things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's really shocking. And just kind of getting back to where this all started. I mean, how much of this blame? Because I remember I lived through the George W. Bush presidency. The 2000 election was definitely something very interesting. And then the Iraq war policies, people be getting disenchanted with what the government was doing, and sort of the backlash with Obama looking for the exact opposite. I mean, how much of this came from really starting in 2000 versus, 2008, 2009?
I would say a lot of it. I mean, the biggest thing is just how they reoriented everybody's conventional wisdom around this anti-terror mindset, which clearly exaggerated the threat. And under that umbrella, they did things like pass the Patriot Act. And, these are sophisticated people. If you pass something like the Patriot Act, it's going to turn into Frankenstein's monster. There's no way to prevent that. But a lot of these seeds go back, way further, I think, back to the 1970s with the population bomb and the Paul Ehrlich and, the world's going to overpopulate and it's going to freeze over and, all this stuff. So how much that's been affected by these forces that are timeless, could it be the China 100-year marathon? Read Michael Pillsbury to read about that. Did that dovetail with some international effort to try to corral the U.S. or, curtail its freedoms? We for a long time, we were the bellwether of freedom and the place, the beautiful city on the hill, whatever that apocryphal thing is. And maybe that became an existential threat to whatever all the goals were for the rest of the planet. Mm-hmm. And so we had to be taken out because life is rough here now. I mean, I relax when I go outside the United States. I mean, it is a tough slog in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to, because I was very much involved in, I guess, the peace marches and during the Iraq War, and just like I knew very early on from my life experiences, from the lessons I've learned from my ancestors, that COVID-19 was a complete scam and a depopulation agenda. What happened around 9/11 and after that really felt like we were getting barraged by propaganda. And I remember at that time traveling to, different parts of the world, Europe, and really feeling a sense of relief because I felt like everything was terror. And just like we had, all the people dying, the tickers in 2020, 2021 on CNN, you had those terror stripes. I mean, to me, as somebody that's read about how, the intelligence community, like the KGB and, the Ottoman Empire, their intelligence communities have worked to manipulate the public. I mean, it seems like the exact same playbook. It's just different colors, more or less. Yeah.
I completely agree.
As somebody that's worked on the inside, Brad, I mean, is there, you're obviously trying to do the right thing, prosecute individuals that are doing bad stuff, but did you ever get a sense of the agenda behind all of this, that there was actually a plan? Was there ever a moment in your career where you're like, wait a minute, there's stuff happening, beyond the 2009 politicizing of our federal agencies? Was there other things you saw along the way that clued you into there being another agenda here?
I mean, I guess China corruption was something I was always paying attention to. I was like less concerned about the Soviets after, the wall came down. But I just thought it was, I'm not sure what I thought it was, but I didn't think it was exponentially more powerful as it turned out to be, nor did I think it was working on some sort of plan to get us to a dystopian hellhole of a future, which now it's like, if you're doing risk analysis, the smart enterprise risk management play would be to assume that is a realistic possibility. At the beginning of the outbreak, I was spending a lot of time developing business in Asia, including Vietnam. And in Vietnam, my theory is that a lot of these controls, these you call it Psy-war, Psy-op, whatever you want to call it, which may or may not involve participation by governments, let alone U.S. government. So it could just be like, so I'm not talking about UFOs. I think a lot of that is driven by ISPs. I worked.
ISP, could you say what ISP means?
Oh, exactly? Basically like your internet address where it's located. So like,
gotcha.
They just bombard all the addresses that are in the U.S. And they were just being completely bombarded. And I was over in Vietnam, and I wasn't being bombarded, and it was a completely different experience. So I could see the doctors over there. They would take 1 hydroxychloroquine a week and drink warm fluids. They're like, "Don't worry about COVID; it's no big deal." It's right on the border with China, and they had like for the first year and a half, maybe 100+ cases, like almost nothing. People there are very connected to family. They pretty much have a live and let live philosophy, like all the things that America captures all the headlines for being. It actually is more like that there in recent years, and so I'm not sure exactly how it all works, but I'm sure that there are. It could be that I'm trying to give assign good intentions to, if they're inside the government doing this, the CIA or Big Five Eyes, who are allies. I'm trying to assign good intentions to them, but those scenarios are being winnowed down. Where that. I mean, I'm having a harder and harder time justifying what I'm seeing.
Wow. Those are powerful words coming from somebody that's actually worked on the inside. Now, I have a very bleak outlook, obviously. It's just from my family history. What I was saying earlier, and you get this, Brad, because you understand the history, is that we're in 1913 right now. 1915 is when the genocide kicks in. And we're talking about how, in the example of the Armenian genocide, that essentially what happened was the government came in that promised the minorities of Turkey, the Christian minorities that were being persecuted, that were 2/3 human, that had no rights under the law, that liberalism was coming. Everybody was going to be free and blah, blah, blah. And lo and behold, all the minorities helped this government come into power, and then they start committing genocide against the minorities. So there's a lot of kind of similar currents. What would you, Brad and Carolyn, I mean, in full honesty, blatant honesty, where do you think this is all going? What does the future hold?
Well, I know where they want it to go. They want to depopulate us and make us pretty much slave states, move us off the rural land into urban city settlements, control everything. Communism, basically. Where I want it to go and where we're fighting for it to go is to restore our systems that have been broken down and infiltrated by corruption, and put good people in those positions. The McCulloughs into the Surgeon General. I mean, got to get our people elected into government positions. For instance, we're campaigning we're non-political, but we want to get Dr. Witcher in the governor's office in Mississippi because he's a good doctor. He treats people, early treatments. He advocates for people to get out of the hospital. He's been a hero of this pandemic and saved many, many lives. That's the kind of people we need in elected official offices. So I'm hoping, I try to stay more optimistic than Brad does sometimes, But I'm hoping that we win. I think it's a spiritual war. It's a war of good against evil, and that good will prevail. But it's going to take waking up the masses. It's going to take waking up the general public to realize you've been duped.
Mhm.
Everything about this pandemic is a lie. The media's got blood on their hands. The politicians have blood on their hands. Of course, the health agencies. So getting people to, it's a hard psychological barrier to cross to realize everyone that you should be able to trust has been lying to you. So
Right.
that's a hard pill to swallow. I saw it early just because I've been through trauma, and I've been blogging about government corruption for years, since 2016. So
Mhm.
it wasn't as hard for me, but for the normal person, just, the soccer mom going on with their day, they're going to think their loved one died in the hospital because they had COVID, not because they were poisoned to death or
Mhm.
euthanized, like we see.
Remdesivir.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
it's we actively try to wake up the general public, and all this division is by design too. I mean, you can control people better when they're divided, because if we get all Americans on our side and realize what's going on, then they don't have a chance. And they may have the money and the power, but we have the people, and the people can make it stop. But
And I mean,
that's a real battle.
yeah, and Brad, we'll get to you in a second, but look at France, what's happening. I mean, the people seem to be really standing up there and really wanting Macron out of office. Why isn't something like that happening over here? Why is it? I mean, the French, as much as we criticize them, I got to give them credit because they seem to be really good about starting revolutions and overthrowing tyrannical governments, much more so than us and the rest of the world. I mean, do you think something like that is possible here, where the streets will fill with people and they will demand change?
Yeah. So if it weren't for the French, we wouldn't be the United States of America, right? I mean, and George Washington was very clear about that. Now things spun a little bit out of control when it went more kinetic over in France. I mean, I'd love to avoid all that.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, I am totally devoted to peace. I subscribe for the Martin Luther King world, even though I advocate for all the civil rights, the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is a risk management, enterprise risk management tool. It prevents a lot of really unproductive, dangerous scheming to be happening over the last 200 years because people say, well, they got that Second Amendment. There's no point in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not want anybody going towards that.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of viability left in our systems, even though sometimes I come off a little bit cynical, skeptical, pessimistic. I see all the genocides, whether it's the Armenian genocide, whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's the Great Leap Forward. I guess it was before that when the landowners were taken out.
Mm-hmm.
Cambodia, as just means to acquire power.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you look at the Soviet takeover and how they acquired power, and then Mao studied it, and he said, you know what? I'm not going to bother holding out a utopia at the end of all this. I'm going to just assume that rotational purges are the end state. And I'm just going to rotationally purge to protect my people and whoever it is who's in my leadership cast at the moment, who I'll have rotational purges there too.
Mm-hmm.
He was totally godless and a sociopath. And I think that whoever's doing this studied Machiavelli, studied Sun Tzu, studied von Clausewitz, studied all these methods for taking power, and they took all the best aspects, and it's all baked in. It's like I tell anyone who's a Second Amendment advocate, whoever, if there is planning involved, and I think you have to assume that there was, first and foremost, they would have planned around the Second Amendment as being a viable threat. And when you start realizing that the planners would have thought about that, and they would have been doing projections about technology and communications and information and everything getting converted to data, which can be converted and perverted much more easily than a reality that's based on physical observations of the universe. That's the other thing that's going on. We went from a reality that was primarily based on physical observations of the universe now to data. And whoever's doing all this, wherever they are, outside, inside the country, whether they're inside the country doing it for good purposes because they're trying to counter what's, I don't know. Let somebody else argue about that. Whoever's doing it, it's basically destroying the First Amendment. It's destroying the Fourth Amendment. They're on their way out. And a lot of the civic compact has been destroyed. People don't really give a crap about anybody. I mean, you have your people are living next door to people who they brought grandma in, and grandma was tortured and killed over 2 months. And the neighbors don't want to hear about it. Like, this is really incredible. Think about, like, there was a murder committed, and it always followed torture. And any of your viewers want to call my bluff, go to chbmp.org and watch all the eyewitness accounts. Are 700 eyewitnesses lying? Are all the physicians who were coming forward and saying that this was happening, are they all lying? Are all the nurses lying?
With the exact same story in all the states. We just came from our national rally we had in San Antonio, and we had victims there from every state in the country, including Alaska, that either drove there, picked up other victims on the way. It was incredible. They all had shirts on with their loved ones' picture on the front. You know, so much so that when the speakers, well-known speakers in this movement, got on stage, they couldn't even speak. They're looking out in the sea of 550 victims or widows that lost someone they love, you know, parents who lost children. That it was so moving and so shocking. It was pretty incredible. But you lose your husband. He gets shot at the gas station, you know, because he was mugged. Everybody wants to come to your side, but if you tell them that he was murdered in a hospital, they don't want anything to do with you. And that's, you know, that's very hard on the victims as well, because we know from interviewing all these hundreds and hundreds of victims, it's all the same story with just a little bit of a twist here and there, but it's all the same story: remdesivir, kidney failure, ventilator death, every time.
25 commonalities. We've documented them based on thousands of interviews. And, you know, we basically know what happened in almost all hospitals in all 50 states as the pandemic unfolded. We know how the scheme changed, how it adapted, and we're collecting all this information for future enforcement agencies when they're rehabilitated and restored.
Wow. Such amazing work you guys are doing. I mean, seriously, this is, you know, to put yourselves on, I'm sure you could be making a lot more money doing something else. But, you know, like you're saying, like both your experiences in your life make money like a lesser on that totem pole rather than doing the right thing.
Yeah, you realize when you go through a tragedy, like I've gone through some grief, that what's important and what's not, and things are put in perspective that other people maybe can't see. Like protecting life is the most important thing.
I'll just say Cece works 14 to 16 hours a day and has done it for free.
Wow.
And getting into this line of work is basically financial harry-carry. I could tell you my story, but there's really no point. The bottom line is we're not going to have anything to leave behind to our children and grandchildren. This is the whole shebang. And we have a 1 to 3 year window to turn this around.
It's so crazy that you say that. I mean, just instinctually, how I threw out 1913. I mean, you know, I said 2 years. You're saying 1 to 3 years. I mean, we're basically saying the same thing, that a lot of us instinctually know through our own discernment, through our own gut feeling, through our own experiences. And I just wish people would, people would pay attention. One thing I wanted to point out, because we're all about solutions on blood money, there are people out there that have taken this vaccine. There are people out there that are still not taking the vaccine, but because of shedding, they're all being affected. And I would highly recommend people to watch Blood Money episode 4 and actually some of our other episodes with Dr. Peter McCullough, because some of these great doctors actually have solutions like chlorine dioxide, ethylene blue, the C60 complete solution. And some of these episodes we have with the doctors really explain. Now, you could click on any episode that contains a doctor in our Blood Money podcast and actually get tangible solutions that will help your loved one. So just wanted to throw that out there. As we come to the close of this episode, let's talk a little bit about this legal path, because we've noticed our court. I mean, everything's corrupt. Actually, the first episode we did with Dr. Peter McCullough, his statement was literally everything is corrupt, everything is broken. He was talking about the medical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, our courts, where he was being, essentially, taken through lawfare, and was it not for the support of good people out there? I mean, he would have been in a really tough place, but he seems to have, at least claimed some sort of victory coming out of that. Unfortunately, a lot of the doctors that we've interviewed haven't. They're destitute. They're, near homelessness, So what is the legal path? Can we trust our broken legal industry to actually provide us a path to some form of victory into this, to restore our rights, to get rid of the tyranny, to hold people accountable for what they have done?
I'll start, CC. I mean, it's our only hope. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, that's why we're building systems to get as many people as we can. I mean, I've had calls from hedge funds in the last 2 weeks poking around. Hey, what are you guys doing? Because everybody's on the one side of the equation that there's no liability for what happened. And now CC can tell you about Matt. Oh, she actually mentioned Matt Tyson, who's a fantastic attorney. He got through motion to dismiss. And today we came up with a dozen different theories, different strategies to poke through, to punch a hole in it, different defendants. Eventually, we are going to poke a hole in it, and we're going to hold these people accountable, but it is going to be a rough road.
Is grand juries a way to circumvent some of the power and control?
Again, you would have to get somebody at either a state or federal government to impanel a grand jury and admit that there's a crime. We can probably better answer that. Like, basically, the way we're going to take the temperature of the FBI, aside from the retired FBI agents that we work with on the platform, and also people that I talk to in the FBI, the way that we're going to gauge the entire agency is have these referrals made on April 19th. And then we're going to measure it. And we'll see if we get any traction at all. I assume we're not going to get any, by the way. And if we don't get any, the idea that we're going to be able to go in and get a grand jury impaneled, an investigative grand jury investigating like more than one wrongful death, not just one around. Like we have a number of cases, I'd say probably maybe 24, where the circumstances are so egregious, where I can almost imagine going in and working up the whole thing for the prosecutors, giving a vanilla indictment, delivering the witnesses on a platter, and shaming somebody into doing something. But in terms of an investigative grand jury like the Antitrust Division would do, where we're investigating industries and cutting hundreds of grand jury subpoenas and doing search warrants and have teams of people to look at things on the same platforms and all that stuff. The government's not doing it, but we're doing it. We have a review platform, and we're working. And that's one of the things we're doing is these widows, they start out kind of mystified by the whole process. By the time they review their own case and their cases and train others to know their cases, they're pretty darn sophisticated investigators.
Wow.
So we're going to, that's what else we can do.
We have to hope that there's some way through this, our legal system. We've got civil cases. We're working with some attorneys that are doing criminal cases, and we have a class action case with against Gilead for making remdesivir false advertising.
Wow.
We're working with some brilliant attorneys on that. So we're trying to hit them at every angle we can. We also have these bracelets, which they're a medical alert bracelet. It says allergic to remdesivir, Velcari, same thing, baricitinib and fentanyl. So it's a medical legal directive. So if you go into a hospital, it's not enough just to say you don't want remdesivir. They'll give it to you anyway. But if you say you're allergic to it, then they can't. And we know that it saves lives because they've called us and told us. And all the funds for these bracelets go to the Gilead class action. So they're going to save lives and help us get through with that case.
chbmp.org is where they can get that.
Amazing. CHB. Say that one more time. Sorry.
CHBMP.
M is in Mary.
Okay.
So it's COVID-19 Humanity Betrayal Memory Project. CHBMP.
Got it.
.org.
Yeah.
And anybody who wants to report their case, Vem, there's also a little button they can get in the queue. We have a growing backlog, but we're also scaling our interviewers. So we should be getting to 1,000 pretty quickly, I think.
Amazing. Now, one last question about the legal path. I've heard, so we're speaking to Dr. Nash, and he's one of the doctors that stood up to the tyranny. And he was saying that via petition, he was actually recommending, because we have some presence in Nevada where you could go to some of these small counties in Nevada and via petition force the attorney general by collecting a certain number of signatures to actually start a grand jury investigation.
That's a great idea, and we should do it. That's why we created this organization, because any good idea like Dr. Nash has, we can take it to our membership, and they are motivated and they are industrious as all get up.
Yeah.
So we can get behind a lot of these good ideas.
Just throwing this out there, there's a county called White Plains County in Nevada, which is one that we're looking at. I think the population is really small, and apparently you need like 1/3 of the population to. So you're talking about like 2,000 signatures, And there's certain rural areas where they have similar mindsets, probably a little bit more right-leaning and a little bit more pro-freedom, pro-constitution. So just throwing that out there for the viewers, we need everybody out there thinking, working, and it's nobody's going to stop this tyranny. There's no knight in shining armor that's going to come and save us. And all one has to do is read history and look at some of the topics, genocides, Holocaust that we've talked about to know that we are the resistance to this. And I'm not when I say things like revolution, resistance, I'm not talking about anything violence. To us, part of the revolution is going and getting grand jury started, circumventing the corruption. That is part of the revolution. Figuring out classic ways where you could actually get what you need done without relying on some of these corrupt officials, many of whom seem like they're bought and sold. In closing,
and although they've politicized this movement, I would just want your viewers to know it's not a political thing. They don't ask you who you voted for before they give you remdesivir or give you the poisonous jab. So they're killing the right with the protocol and the left with the jabs or injuring. So this has affected everybody across the board, and it's just a matter of deprogramming the brainwashing that people have been subjected to.
Yep. In closing, is there anything that we didn't touch upon that either Carolyn or Brad you would like to mention?
Just get involved. Visit CHBMP, watch some stories, join the task force, volunteer, donate whatever you can, because it's going to take all of us to unite, become undivided, and get together to take this down and save our country and save our people.
Yep. And there's books out there. There's a book called Armenian Golgotha. Read that, learn from history, and that's where this is all going. Look at the signs. I mean, anybody that reads that book by page 50, you're going to realize a lot of similarities. And by page 60 or 70, some awful things start to happen that are unimaginable. But what is happening today is unimaginable. So don't think that other stuff is not possible.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Carolyn and Brad, for showing up for our Blood Money podcast. We truly appreciate it. Viewers, sorry about my camera issues here. I'm just going to turn it back on so I could do the close here. It's still stuttering, but Thank you for joining us for this episode of Blood Money. We will see you on the next episode. And please check out our platform, america.happens.com, where we have a lot of our episodes posted, including actually a brand new series that we're excited about called Meet the Frontline Doctors, where every episode we celebrate the frontline doctors. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next episode of Blood Money.